Sheriff Rick Dalton kicked the wounded police officer's ribs as she lay bleeding in the snow, her own handcuffs cutting into her wrists behind her back. Officer Sarah Chen gasped for air, her police dog Rex whimpering 3 feet away, shot and barely breathing. The crowd of witnesses at the Mountain gas station stood frozen, phones in their pockets, too terrified of the corrupt sheriff to move. Dalton smiled, knowing he controlled this town, knowing no one would dare challenge him, knowing he'd finally silenced the one officer who discovered his drug empire. But he made one fatal mistake. He had no idea the quiet man filling up his truck at Pump 7 was Jake Cole, a Navy SEAL who'd spent 12 years taking down warlords, and his K-9 partner Atlas had just caught the scent of blood on the wind. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from, and if this story touches your heart, please subscribe for more true stories of heroes who stand up for the innocent. The morning sun painted the peaks of Pine Ridge, Montana with gold and orange light. The small mountain town sat in a valley, surrounded by forests that stretched for miles in every direction. Snow covered the ground, fresh from last night's storm, and the air smelled like pine needles and wood smoke from chimneys. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. 3,000 people called Pine Ridge home. They had one main street with a diner, a hardware store, a gas station, and a small police department with 6 officers. The town made its living from logging and the few tourists who came through on their way to Glacier National Park. But beneath the peaceful surface, something dark had taken root. For 15 years, the same man had worn the sheriff's badge. For 15 years, Sheriff Rick Dalton had built an empire of fear and corruption. And for 15 years, no one had been brave enough to stop him. The wind moved through the pine trees, making a sound like whispers. The temperature hovered at 28 degrees. Ice formed at the edges of the river that ran through town. This was March in Montana, beautiful, cold, and unforgiving. In 6 hours, that beauty would be stained with blood. Jake Cole drove his black Ford truck into Pine Ridge at 8 in the morning. He was 40 years old, 6 feet tall, with short brown hair going gray at the temples. He wore jeans, a dark jacket, and boots built for serious cold. His movements were economic and precise, the kind that came from years of military training. In the passenger seat sat Atlas, a German shepherd with intelligent brown eyes and a black and tan coat. The dog was 7 years old, trained for search and rescue operations in the Navy. He'd saved 12 lives in combat zones across 3 continents. Now he sat alert, watching the unfamiliar town pass by the windows. Jake had driven 18 hours straight from San Diego. He was here for one reason, to attend the funeral of Tom Chen, his best friend from boot camp 20 years ago. Tom had been a Marine, served with honor, came home to Montana to raise his daughter Sarah in a quiet, safe place. Last month, Tom had died of a heart attack at 52 years old. Jake hadn't been to Pine Ridge in 15 years. The last time was for Tom's wife's funeral. Now he was coming to say goodbye to his best friend and check on Sarah, who Tom had always said was his pride and joy. She'd followed in his footsteps, became a police officer, served her community with the same honor her father had shown. Jake's jaw was tight as he drove. He didn't like funerals. He'd been to too many. But you showed up for your brothers even after they were gone. That's what you did. Atlas whined softly. The dog sensed Jake's mood. Jake reached over and scratched behind the dog's ears. "It's okay, boy," Jake said quietly. "We'll pay our respects and head home." He had no idea he'd still be in Pine Ridge 3 months later. The Mountain View gas station sat at the edge of town where Highway 93 met Main Street. It had 6 pumps, a convenience store, and a small parking area. The owner, an older man named George Miller, kept the place clean and the coffee fresh. Local folks stopped here every morning on their way to work. At 8:30, the parking lot had 5 vehicles. George stood behind the counter inside, restocking cigarettes. 2 loggers sat at the small table near the window, drinking coffee and talking about the upcoming season. A young mother named Bate was filling up her minivan, her 2 kids visible through the windows in their car seats. The bell above the door chimed as people came and went. The radio played country music softly. Through the windows, you could see the mountains rising up on all sides, snow-covered and magnificent in the morning light. It was peaceful, normal, the kind of morning that happened in Pine Ridge every day. Jake pulled up to Pump 7. He got out, stretched his back after the long drive, and started filling his tank. Atlas jumped down from the truck and shook himself, his tags jingling. Jake had the dog on a leash, but Atlas stayed close without pulling, trained and disciplined. Jake looked at the mountains and breathed the cold air. It was beautiful country. He could see why Tom had loved it here. Could see why he'd thought this would be a safe place to raise a daughter. As the bell chimed again, a police SUV pulled into the parking lot. Jake glanced over, nodding it automatically. Old military habits never died. The vehicle parked near the door. 2 people got out. One was a woman in her late 20s wearing a police uniform. She was 5'6", Korean-American, with her black hair pulled back in a regulation bun. She moved with purpose and confidence. A German shepherd walked beside her, wearing a K9 vest with police written across it. Jake's chest tightened. Sarah, Tom's daughter. He recognized her from photos, though she'd grown up since the last ones he'd seen. She looked like her father, same determined expression, same straight posture. He started to raise his hand to call out to her. But before he could, another vehicle pulled in fast, tires crunching on gravel. A black police SUV with gold trim. Newer, bigger, cleaner than Sarah's vehicle. The kind that screamed authority and power. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Sheriff Rick Dalton was 6'4" and weighed 240 pounds. He was 55 years old with a thick neck, a beer gut, and small, mean eyes set in a red face. His brown uniform was custom-tailored to accommodate his size, and his gun belt creaked with equipment. He wore his sheriff's badge pinned prominently on his chest, polished to a shine. He moved with the confidence of a man who owned everything he could see. His boots hit the pavement hard. His hand rested on his gun. His eyes swept the parking lot like a king surveying his kingdom. People reacted immediately. George looked down at his counter, suddenly very focused on the cigarettes. The 2 loggers stopped talking mid-sentence and stared at their coffee. Bate quickly finished pumping gas and got in her van, not even going inside to pay, just driving away. She'd pay tomorrow when the sheriff wasn't there. 2 more men got out of the sheriff's SUV. Deputies. Both were in their 30s, both were big, both had the look of men who enjoyed their work a little too much. Deputy Frank Hayes was bald with a goatee. Deputy Mike Stone had a buzz cut and a crooked nose from too many bar fights. Together, the 3 of them took up space like they owned it, because in Pine Ridge they did. Dalton's eyes locked onto Sarah immediately. His face twisted into something that might have been a smile if smiles were supposed to make people afraid. "Officer Chen," he called out, his voice loud and carrying. "Fancy seeing you here." Sarah's back stiffened. Her dog Rex growled low in his throat. She put her hand on Rex's head, calming him. "Sheriff," she said, her voice professional and controlled. Jake stood at his pump watching. Something was wrong. He could feel it, the same instinct that had kept him alive in Iraq and Afghanistan. The way the sheriff looked at Sarah wasn't right. The way she held herself, defensive, careful, wasn't right either. Atlas pressed against Jake's leg, sensing danger. Dalton walked toward Sarah with slow, heavy steps. His deputies flanked him 3 feet back on either side. They were doing it on purpose, Jake realized, creating a show of force, intimidating her. "I've been looking for you," Dalton said, stopping 6 feet from Sarah. "You missed our meeting yesterday." "I was on patrol," Sarah replied. Her hand stayed on Rex's head. The dog's growl grew louder. "I told dispatch where I was." "Did you now?" Dalton hooked his thumbs in his belt. "See, that's funny because I checked with dispatch and they said you were up at the old Miller Road, way out of your usual area. Makes a man wonder what you were doing up there." Sarah's jaw tightened, following up on a call. "What call?" "Anonymous tip about illegal dumping." "Find anything?" "Oh, no, sir." Dalton took another step closer. You know what I think, Officer Chen? I think you were snooping where you don't belong. I think you've been asking questions you shouldn't be asking. I think you've forgotten who runs this department. The loggers inside the gas station watched through the window, their faces pale. George had his phone in his hand, but he didn't dial, just held it uncertain. Jake's hand moved to his belt, checking for his own phone. Something was very wrong here. This wasn't how a sheriff talked to his officer. This was how a criminal talked to someone who threatened him. "I'm doing my job," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the fear Jake could see in her eyes. "Just like my father taught me." Dalton's face flushed dark red. "Your father," he spat. "Tom Chen was a fool who didn't know when to mind his own business. Guess it runs in the family." Sarah's hand curled into a fist. Rex barked once, sharp and loud. "You better control that dog," Dalton said, his voice dropping low and dangerous, "before something bad happens to him." It happened fast. Dalton moved forward and Sarah stepped back, her hand going to her radio. But Deputy Hayes was faster. He grabbed her arm, yanking the radio off her belt and throwing it to the ground. It shattered on the pavement. "Hey," Sarah shouted. Rex lunged forward, barking furiously, protecting his partner. Deputy Stone pulled his taser and fired. The barbs hit Rex in the side. The dog yelped and collapsed, his body seizing from the electrical current. "Rex," Sarah dropped to her knees beside her dog. That's when Dalton kicked her. His boot caught her in the ribs and she fell sideways onto the pavement with a gasp of pain. Before she could recover, Hayes grabbed her arms and wrenched them behind her back. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut echoed across the parking lot. "You're under arrest," Dalton said, standing over her, "for assaulting an officer and resisting arrest." "I didn't do anything," Sarah struggled, but Hayes had 50 pounds on her and used it to keep her pinned. Her face was pressed against the cold pavement. Rex was still shaking from the taser, unable to stand. "You attacked me," Dalton said loudly, playing to the audience. "Multiple witnesses saw it. Isn't that right, George?" Inside the gas station, George stood frozen, his face pale. He didn't answer. "I said, isn't that right?" Dalton's voice was a whip crack. "Why, yes, sir," George stammered. I saw it." The two loggers nodded quickly, not meeting anyone's eyes. Dalton smiled. This was how he controlled Pine Ridge. Fear. Everyone was too afraid to tell the truth, and anyone who tried to expose him ended up arrested or run out of town or worse. Bate, who had driven away, had her phone out, recording from her minivan 100 yards down the road. But she was too far away to help. Sarah struggled to breathe, her ribs screaming where Dalton had kicked her. Tears of pain and anger ran down her face. Rex whimpered, trying to crawl toward her. And Jake Cole, who had stood watching for 30 seconds that felt like hours, made a decision. "Let her go." The words cut through the morning air like a knife. Everyone turned to look at Jake. He stood 10 feet away, Atlas at his side, his body completely still except for his eyes, which were locked on Sheriff Dalton. Dalton looked at Jake like he was noticing him for the first time. "Who the hell are you?" "I said let her go." Jake's voice was calm, quiet, and absolutely certain. "Now." Dalton laughed. It was a big, booming sound full of contempt. "You got some nerve, boy. This is police business. You need to get back in your truck and drive on." Jake didn't move. "That woman is handcuffed and injured. She needs medical attention. Her dog needs medical attention. You're going to let Deputy Hayes remove those handcuffs, and then you're going to step back." "Or what?" Dalton's hand moved to his gun. Hayes and Stone moved to flank him again, forming a line. Jake's expression didn't change. "Or you're going to have a very bad day." The parking lot went completely silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. George stood in the doorway of the gas station, his hand on his phone. The loggers pressed their faces to the window. Bate was still recording from her van. Dalton's face turned purple with rage. No one had talked to him like this in 15 years. "No one. Do you know who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," Jake said. Each word was precise and controlled. "You're a corrupt sheriff who just assaulted an officer and attacked a service animal in front of witnesses. And you're about to add assaulting a federal witness to your list. Federal witness, Dalton's confidence flickered for just a second. Jake pulled out his phone, holding it up so Dalton could see the screen. It showed an active call. I've been on the line with the FBI field office in Billings for the last 2 minutes. They've heard everything. They've got your badge number from your uniform. And right now, 3 witnesses are live streaming this to social media. Your name is Rick Dalton. You've been sheriff of Pine Ridge for 15 years, and you just ended your career. Dalton stared at the phone, at Jake, at the phone again. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. Then rage took over. Arrest him, Dalton shouted. Arrest him for interfering with police business. Hayes and Stone moved toward Jake. Atlas growled, the sound deep and threatening. Jake put one hand on the dog's head. Atlas guard, he said quietly. The German shepherd moved in front of Jake, his teeth bared, his body coiled to attack. Hayes and Stone stopped, looking at the dog and then at each other. A 4th police vehicle pulled into the parking lot. This one was a patrol car. The officer who got out was in his 50s, gray-haired, with a gut that hung over his belt. His name tag read WATSON. Sheriff, Watson called out, you need backup. About damn time, Dalton snapped. Arrest this man for interfering and for threatening officers with a dangerous animal. Watson looked at Jake, at Atlas, at Sarah still on the ground. His face showed nothing. Yes, sir. He walked toward Jake with his handcuffs out. Sir, I need you to come with me. Jake didn't resist. He handed Atlas's leash to George, who had come out of the gas station. Hold him, don't let them touch him. George took the leash with shaking hands. Watson cuffed Jake's hands behind his back, but not as roughly as Hayes had done to Sarah. Jake noticed that. He also noticed Watson avoided looking directly at Sarah or Rex. Take him to the station, Dalton ordered. Book him for assault on an officer and resisting. I didn't touch anyone, Jake said calmly. Your dog threatened my deputies, Dalton shot back. That's assault with a deadly weapon in Montana. It was complete garbage legally, and everyone there knew it. But this was Dalton's town, his rules. Watson put Jake in the back of his patrol car. Through the window, Jake watched as Hayes finally pulled Sarah to her feet. She swayed, holding her ribs, her face pale with pain. Rex was standing now, shaky but alive. Sarah reached for him, but Stone pulled her toward Dalton's SUV. Rex needs a vet, Sarah said, her voice breaking. That animal attacked a police officer, Dalton said. He'll be impounded as evidence. Oh, you can't. I can do whatever I want. Dalton leaned close to Sarah's face. Your father learned that lesson too late. Guess you're about to learn it too. They put Sarah in the back of Dalton's SUV. Stone grabbed Rex's leash and dragged the still shaking dog toward another vehicle. Jake watched it all, his face like stone, his mind already working. He'd been in the truck when he'd called his contact at the FBI. He'd given them the location and situation. Help was coming. But help took time. And time was something Sarah Chen might not have. Watson started the car and drove toward town. As they pulled away, Jake saw George standing with Atlas, his phone still in his hand. The 2 loggers were in the parking lot now, talking to each other in low voices. And Bate, in her minivan down the road, was uploading video footage to YouTube with shaking hands. The word was getting out. The question was whether it would get out fast enough. The Pine Ridge Police Station was a small brick building on Main Street, built in the 1970s and showing its age. Watson drove Jake around to the back entrance and walked him inside through a steel door. They went down a hallway with fluorescent lights that flickered and buzzed. The holding area had 3 cells, all empty. Watson put Jake in the middle one and removed the handcuffs. Jake rubbed his wrists and looked around. Concrete floor, metal bench, bars that needed paint. No windows, a camera in the corner with a blinking red light. You should have kept driving, Watson said quietly. He was standing outside the cell, not quite meeting Jake's eyes. That woman needed help, Jake replied. And now you're in here and she's probably in worse trouble than before. Watson shook his head. You don't understand how things work in Pine Ridge. Then explain it to me. Watson looked at the camera, then back at Jake. I can't just sit tight. Your truck's been impounded. You're not going anywhere. He walked away, his footsteps echoing down the hall. A door slammed shut and Jake was alone. Jake sat on the metal bench and thought about what he'd seen. Sheriff Dalton wasn't just corrupt, he was confident. The kind of confidence that came from years of getting away with crimes. The way he'd talked about Sarah's father, Tom Chen, suggested Tom had known something or tried to stop something. And now Sarah was asking the same questions her father had, which meant she'd probably found the same answers, which meant she was in serious danger. Jake pulled out his phone. They hadn't taken it yet, either an oversight or Watson's small act of rebellion. He had 2% battery left. He had one number to call. The phone rang twice. A voice answered. Special Agent Maria Reeves, FBI Billings Field Office. Agent Reeves, this is Jake Cole. We spoke earlier about the situation in Pine Ridge. Mr. Cole, her voice was sharp, professional. I have units en route to your location, ETA 4 hours. The sheriff's department there has a complicated history with federal oversight. 4 hours might be too long. Sheriff Dalton has arrested Officer Sarah Chen on false charges. She's the one who called your office 2 days ago about corruption. There was a pause. Officer Chen called us. She claimed to have evidence of drug trafficking and money laundering involving the sheriff and several county officials. She was supposed to deliver that evidence this morning at 10. Jake checked his watch. It was 9:15. She won't make that meeting. Dalton has her. I think he knows she was talking to you. Do you know where the evidence is? No, but I'm going to find out. Mr. Cole, I need you to stay where you are and stay safe. Let us handle this. With respect, Agent, you're 4 hours away. A lot can happen in 4 hours. I understand you're a decorated Navy SEAL, Mr. Cole. I understand you have the skills to handle dangerous situations. But this is a federal investigation, and I need you to stand down. If you interfere, it could compromise the case. Jake's jaw tightened. She was right, legally, officially, by the book. But the book didn't account for a woman and her dog being beaten in a parking lot. The book didn't account for a corrupt sheriff who thought he was above the law. I'll do what I can, Jake said. It wasn't a promise. It was the truth. 4 hours, Agent Reeves repeated. Hold on for 4 hours. The call ended. Jake's phone died 2 seconds later, screen going black. He put it in his pocket and looked around the cell again. The camera was still recording. Watson would be watching, or Dalton would be. Jake needed to appear calm, patient, like he was following orders. But Jake Cole had spent 12 years in special operations. He'd escaped from tougher prisons than this in countries where guards shot first and asked questions never. A small-town holding cell with one camera and aging locks. He gave it 20 minutes. Jake was studying the lock mechanism on his cell when he heard footsteps in the hallway, quick, light, nervous. The door opened and Watson appeared, but he wasn't alone. Behind him was a woman in her 30s, wearing the gray uniform of a police dispatcher. She was small, 5'3", with blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail and glasses that magnified her brown eyes. Her name tag read Linda Marsh. Watson looked at the camera, then reached up and adjusted it slightly. It now pointed at the ceiling instead of Jake's cell. Linda put a finger to her lips, then pulled a small electronic device from her pocket and set it on the bench outside Jake's cell. A light blinked green. White noise generator, she whispered. The camera feed will record static for the next 10 minutes. It'll look like a technical glitch. Jake stood up slowly. Who are you? Linda Marsh, I'm the day shift dispatcher. I've been working for this department for 8 years. She pulled a folder from under her arm. And for the last 3 years, I've been collecting evidence against Sheriff Dalton. Watson stood watch at the door, his back to them, his body tense. Linda opened the folder and spread papers on the floor where Jake could see them through the bars. Bank statements, she said, pointing. Dalton's been depositing $10,000 cash every month for 6 years. He claims it's from consulting work, but there's no business registered, no clients, no paper trail. She pulled out more papers, property records. Dalton owns 4 houses in Pine Ridge under different LLCs. He rents them to local businesses. Those businesses are all fronts. They report income but have no actual customers. The money flows through them and back to Dalton. Jake knelt down studying the documents. Money laundering. That's the small stuff. Linda's hands shook as she pulled out photographs. This is the real operation. The photos showed the interior of a warehouse. Tables covered with plastic bags full of pills. Scales, money counters. Men Jake didn't recognize loading boxes into trucks. Prescription opioids, Linda explained. Dalton has a deal with a corrupt doctor in Billings. The doctor writes fake prescriptions. Dalton picks up the pills from multiple pharmacies, then sells them to dealers across Montana and Idaho. He's been doing it for 8 years, moving thousands of pills a month. Jake looked up at her. How did you get these photos? Tom Chen took them. Linda's voice broke. Sarah's father, he was ex-military like you. He noticed too many overdoses in town, too many young people getting addicted. He started investigating on his own. He broke into Dalton's warehouse 6 months before he died. Jake's chest tightened. Dalton killed him. Made it look like a heart attack. Tom was 52, healthy, ran 5 miles a day. Then one morning he didn't wake up. The county medical examiner ruled it natural causes. That medical examiner is Dalton's brother-in-law. The pieces clicked into place in Jake's mind. Sarah figured it out. Linda nodded. She found her father's evidence 3 weeks ago. He'd hidden it in their attic. She made copies of everything and called the FBI. But Dalton has someone inside the field office. He knew she'd made contact. That's why he moved on her this morning. Where's Sarah now? I don't know. Dalton took her somewhere, not here. Linda's eyes filled with tears. He's going to kill her, Mr. Cole. He's going to make it look like an accident, just like he did with her father. And without the evidence, the FBI won't move fast enough. Where's the evidence? Jake asked. The copies Sarah made. I don't know. She wouldn't tell me, said it was safer if I didn't know. But she said if anything happened to her, it would get to the right people. Jake thought fast. Her dog, Rex, where would they take him? Watson turned around from the door. The county animal shelter. It's run by Mary Henderson. She's not corrupt. She's one of the good ones. Then that's where Sarah would hide evidence, Jake said. Somewhere Dalton wouldn't think to look, but somewhere obvious to people who knew her. Linda stared at him. You think she hid evidence with her dog? Military working dogs have gear, vests, collar tags, ID chips, places you could hide a USB drive or photos. Sarah knew Dalton was coming for her. She would have prepared. Watson checked his watch. We have 6 minutes before that white noise generator runs out. Linda gathered the papers quickly. Mr. Cole, I've been too afraid to act. Dalton has a file on me. He knows I got a DUI 5 years ago, covered it up for me. Says if I ever cross him, he'll destroy my career and put me in jail. I've watched him hurt this town for years and I did nothing. You're doing something now, Jake said quietly. She looked at him with desperate hope. Can you stop him? Can you save Sarah? Jake met her eyes. Yes, but I need to get out of this cell. Watson pulled a keyring from his pocket. His hand shook as he unlocked the cell door. If Dalton finds out I helped you. He won't, Jake stepped out. Linda, I need you to go back to dispatch like nothing happened. Watson, you came down here to check on me, found the camera malfunctioning, left to report it. I'll be gone in 5 minutes. You didn't see anything. Linda grabbed his arm. Sarah's a good person. She's all Tom had left in this world. Please bring her home. I will, Jake promised, or I'll die trying. Watson led Jake through the back corridors of the police station. They moved quickly, avoiding areas with cameras. Watson knew every blind spot, every unused room, every exit. He'd worked here for 20 years. They ended up in an old evidence room that hadn't been used in years, filled with dusty boxes and broken equipment. Watson pulled out a box labeled CHEN, Thomas Personal EFFECTS, and opened it. Inside were Tom Chen's belongings from the day he died. His wallet, his watch, his jacket, and a leather-bound journal. "Sarah doesn't know this exists," Watson said quietly. "I kept it. Dalton ordered everything destroyed, but I couldn't. Tom was my friend." Jake opened the journal. The pages were filled with neat handwriting, dates, observations. Tom had been documenting Dalton's crimes in careful detail. January 2024 followed Dalton to warehouse on Industrial Road. Saw him meeting with known dealers. Took photos. Need to be careful, he's watching everyone. February 2024 found connection between Dalton and Dr. Richard Stone in Billings. Stone writing fake prescriptions. Hundreds of them, pills going to addicts across 3 counties. Overdose rate in Pine Ridge has tripled in 5 years. How many people has Dalton killed for money? March 2024, Dalton knows I'm asking questions. He pulled me over yesterday on pretense of broken taillight. It was a warning. Sarah doesn't know what I'm doing, can't tell her, don't want her involved. If something happens to me, the evidence is in the attic. She'll find it eventually. She's smart like her mother. Jake read page after page. Tom had been methodical, brave, and ultimately outmatched. Dalton had killed him before he could get the evidence to the FBI. "Why didn't you come forward?" Jake asked Watson. The older officer's face was full of shame. "Because I'm a coward. Because Dalton has dirt on everyone. He knows I faked evidence in a case 10 years ago to get a conviction on a child molester. The guy was guilty, but I didn't follow procedure. Dalton said if I ever cross him, he'll expose me, I'll lose my pension, maybe go to prison." Watson sat down heavily on a box. "Tom Chen was braver than me, he risked everything, and it got him killed. I've been living with that guilt every day since." Jake closed the journal. "You can't change the past, but you can help me stop this. Tell me about Dalton's operation." Watson took a deep breath. "The warehouse is on Industrial Road, 3 miles outside town. It's registered to a shell company. Dalton keeps the pills there until he moves them. He's got 2 full-time guys working for him, Rick Barnes and Leo Tucker. They're both ex-cons, both loyal to Dalton because he gave them jobs when no one else would." "How does he move the product?" "Logging trucks. They leave Pine Ridge every week headed for Spokane, Seattle, Portland. Pills hidden in fake compartments in the logs. State police never think to check lumber shipments." "Who else is involved?" Watson counted on his fingers. "Mayor Brad Johnson, he approves zoning and looks the other way. Judge Ellen Crawford, she dismisses cases and seals records. Dr. Richard Stone in Billings writes the prescriptions. County Medical Examiner Frank Crawford, Ellen's husband, covers up suspicious deaths. And probably a dozen dealers across 3 states." Jake processed the information. This wasn't just one corrupt cop. This was an entire network. Taking down Dalton would require taking down everyone at once, with enough evidence to make sure none of them walked free. "Dalton's most vulnerable spot?" Jake asked. "His ego," Watson said immediately. "He thinks he's untouchable. He's gotten sloppy over the years, kept too many records, trusted too many people. Tom found the evidence because Dalton left a trail a mile wide. He just never thought anyone would be brave enough to follow it." "Sarah was brave enough." "Sarah's like her father." Watson's voice was thick. "She believes in justice, believes in doing the right thing even when it's hard, and now she's going to die for it unless someone helps her." Jake stood up. "Where would Dalton take her?" Watson thought for a moment. "The warehouse. It's isolated, no neighbors, no witnesses. He's probably planning to stage an accident, maybe make it look like she overdosed, or maybe just make her disappear." "How long before the FBI gets here?" Watson checked his watch. Agent Reeves said 4 hours. That was 45 minutes ago, so 3 hours and 15 minutes. "Sarah doesn't have 3 hours." "No," Watson agreed, "she doesn't." Jake looked at the older officer. "Are you with me? Because once we move on this, there's no going back. Dalton will know you helped." Watson stood up slowly. His hands weren't shaking anymore. Tom Chen was my friend, I let him down, I'm not letting his daughter down too. Then let's go get my dog and make a plans. The Pine Ridge Animal Shelter was a small building on the north side of town, run by Mary Henderson and funded mostly through donations. Mary was 60 years old, gray-haired, tough as nails, and known throughout the county for taking in strays no one else wanted. Jake and Watson arrived at the shelter at 11 o'clock. Watson had driven them in his personal truck, not his patrol car. Jake had borrowed Watson's civilian jacket and a baseball cap, keeping his face down in case Dalton had deputies watching the roads. Atlas was in the back seat, alert and ready. The dog knew something important was happening. Mary met them at the door. She took one look at Watson's face and said, "Sarah's in trouble, isn't she?" "How did you know?" Watson asked. "Because Deputy Stone brought Rex in an hour ago and told me the dog was evidence in a criminal case. Rex has been Sarah's partner for 4 years. That dog would die for her. Something's very wrong." Mary stepped back to let them in. "Is Sarah alive?" "We think so," Jake said, "but we need to find evidence she hid. We think she might have put it with Rex." Mary led them to the kennels. Rex was in the largest one, lying on a blanket, still shaky from the taser. When he saw them, he struggled to his feet and whined. Jake opened the kennel slowly, speaking softly. "Hey Rex, hey boy, I'm a friend, I'm here to help Sarah." Rex sniffed Jake's hand, then Atlas's nose through the chain link. The two dogs recognized each other as working animals. Rex's tail wagged weakly. Jake examined Rex's vest carefully. It was standard police K9 gear, pockets for first aid supplies, patches identifying him as a law enforcement animal, attachment points for a leash. He checked every pocket, every seam, every Velcro strip. "Oh, nothing." He moved to Rex's collar next. It was a thick nylon collar with a metal ID tag and a small GPS tracker. Jake unscrewed the tracker casing. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was a micro SD card. "Got it," Jake said quietly. Mary brought him a laptop. Jake inserted the SD card and opened the files. His expression grew darker with each one. Photographs of the warehouse interior, clear shots of Dalton loading drugs, bank statements showing wire transfers, audio recordings of conversations between Dalton and Mayor Johnson discussing shipment schedules. Spreadsheets listing dealers, quantities, prices, text messages between Dalton and Dr. Stone. Everything. "This is enough to put Dalton away for life," Watson said, looking over Jake's shoulder. "Multiple counts of drug trafficking, money laundering, conspiracy, maybe murder if they can prove he killed Tom." Jake copied the files to a USB drive. He handed it to Watson. "Get this to Agent Reeves, tell her everything. Tell her Dalton has Sarah and we're going to get her." Watson stared at the USB drive. I can't." "Yes, you can. You're already in this, Watson. Dalton knows you helped me escape. Your choice now is to help finish this or run and spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder." Watson's jaw clenched, then he closed his fist around the USB drive. "What do you need?" "A distraction. In exactly 1 hour, I need you to create a situation that pulls Dalton's attention away from the warehouse. Something big enough he has to respond personally." "Like what?" Jake thought for a moment. Is there anyone in town Dalton considers important, someone he'd drop everything to protect? Watson's eyes widened. Mayor Johnson, their business partners, if something happened to the mayor. "Not something that actually hurts him," Jake said quickly. "Just something that looks serious. Think you can arrange that?" Watson nodded slowly. Yeah, I can do that." Mary looked between them. "You're going after Sarah." "Oh yes, ma'am." "Take Rex with you. He'll want to be there when you find her." Jake looked at the dog. Rex was standing now, his eyes clear and focused despite the earlier taser shock. He was a trained police K9, trained to protect, trained to fight, and he loved Sarah Chen more than anything in the world. "Okay," Jake said. "Rex, you're with me. Atlas, you're the backup. Watson, you're our cavalry. Mary, you're the one who never saw any of us." Mary smiled grimly. I've been looking the other way in this town for 15 years watching Dalton destroy good people. It's time someone stood up to him. Jake checked his watch. It was 11:30. The FBI wouldn't arrive until at least 2 o'clock. Sarah had been in Dalton's hands for over 2 hours now. Every instinct in Jake's body screamed that time was running out. The warehouse on Industrial Road sat between the forest and the river, a metal building with no windows and one rolling door for trucks. A chain-link fence surrounded the property with barbed wire on top. One vehicle was parked outside, Dalton's black SUV. Jake approached from the tree line, moving quietly through the snow. He had Watson's binoculars and his years of training in stealth movement. Atlas and Rex stayed close, both dogs silent and alert. He watched the warehouse for 30 minutes, timing everything. 2 men came outside for a smoke break at noon. Jake recognized them from Watson's descriptions, Rick Barnes and Leo Tucker, Dalton's muscle. They laughed and talked for 10 minutes, then went back inside. 15 minutes later, Dalton himself came out. He was on his phone, packing, his voice carrying across the empty lot. I don't care what you have to do, just make sure those pills are in Spokane by tonight. We've got buyers waiting. Pause. No, the cop's not a problem anymore. She'll be just another overdose victim by tomorrow morning. Yeah, tragic. Officer overdoses in her own home, probably the stress of losing her father. Dalton laughed. No one's going to question it. Jake's hands curled into fists. Sarah was alive, but Dalton was planning to kill her and frame it as an overdose. Classic move, discredit the victim while eliminating them. Dalton went back inside. Jake checked his watch, 1:45. Watson would create the distraction in 15 minutes. Jake circled the building, looking for entry points. The main door was too obvious, but the back of the warehouse had a ventilation system with access panels if he could get on the roof. He found a stack of old pallets against the back wall, climbing material. He waited until Dalton's men took their next smoke break, then moved fast. He was on the roof in 20 seconds, barely making a sound. The ventilation access panel was secured with 2 screws. Jake used his pocket knife to remove them. The opening was tight, but he'd fit, just barely. He looked down at the 2 dogs waiting in the snow. Guard, he whispered. If I'm not back in 20 minutes, run, find Watson. Atlas and Rex both gave small whines of protest, but settled into guard positions. Jake slipped into the ventilation shaft. It was dark, cramped, and cold. He moved slowly, inch by inch, following the ductwork toward the sound of voices. Below him, through metal grates, he could see into the warehouse. The main space was full of equipment, tables, scales, boxes of pills in prescription bottles. And in the back corner, in a small office with glass walls, he saw Sarah. She was handcuffed to a chair, her face bruised, her uniform torn, but she was conscious, alert, and very much alive. Dalton stood in front of her talking. Jake couldn't hear the words, but the tone was clear, threats, intimidation, breaking her down. Barnes and Tucker stood outside the office, armed with pistols on their hips. Jake memorized every detail, 3 hostiles. Sarah secured but able to move if freed, multiple exits, lots of product that could be used as evidence. Windows in the office, but they were interior, no escape that way. His phone buzzed, text from Watson, distraction in 3 minutes, good luck. Jake backed out of the ventilation shaft and dropped to the ground. Atlas and Rex were exactly where he'd left them, both tense with anticipation. Soon, Jake told them quietly, very soon. While Jake was at the warehouse, events were unfolding in town. Linda Marsh sat at her dispatcher desk in the police station, her hands shaking as she answered calls and monitored radios. Dalton had called in 3 times in the last hour, demanding updates on Jake's location. Linda had lied each time, saying he was still in his cell, saying everything was fine. She knew Dalton would check eventually. She knew when he found out Jake was gone, he'd come for her. But she kept lying, kept buying Jake time, kept praying the FBI would arrive before Dalton figured it out. In town, George Miller at the gas station closed early. He told his wife what he'd witnessed, and she'd insisted he shut down and get out of sight. The video of Sarah's arrest was all over social media now: Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. The local news in Billings had picked it up. Corrupt sheriff attacks officer was trending in Montana. The two loggers who'd been in the gas station had packed up and left town entirely. They knew how Dalton dealt with witnesses. Bate, the young mother who'd recorded the incident, had contacted a lawyer in Billings. She was preparing to testify to the FBI. Her hands still shook when she thought about what she'd seen, but she'd made copies of the video and sent them to 7 different people. If anything happened to her, the video wouldn't disappear. People were talking, fear was cracking. The wall of silence Dalton had built over 15 years was developing holes. But Dalton still had power, he still had guns, and he still had Sarah. At exactly 1 o'clock, Watson put his plan into action. He drove to Mayor Brad Johnson's house, a large colonial on the nice side of town. Johnson's wife, Patricia, was in the garden. "Mrs. Johnson," Watson called out, getting out of his truck. "I need to speak with your husband, it's urgent." Patricia Johnson was 60 years old, elegant and sharp as a tack. She'd been married to Brad for 30 years, and she'd suspected for at least 10 that her husband was involved in something illegal. "He's inside," she said, studying Watson's face. "What's this about?" "Official police business, ma'am." She didn't move. "Is my husband in trouble, Deputy Watson?" Watson met her eyes. In that moment, he made a choice. "Yes, ma'am, he's been involved with Sheriff Dalton in criminal activities. The FBI is coming. If you have any evidence, any records, anything that could help clean up this town, now's the time." Patricia Johnson stared at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Come with me." She led Watson inside to her husband's home office. The mayor wasn't home, he was at the town hall. Patricia opened a safe hidden behind a painting and pulled out a thick accordion folder. "I've been collecting this for 5 years," she said quietly. "Every suspicious bank statement, every strange phone call, every time Brad came home smelling like cigarettes and lies, I knew he was corrupt. I just didn't know how to stop him without destroying my own life." She handed Watson the folder. "But I can't live with it anymore. Not after I saw that video of Sarah Chen this morning. Tom Chen was a good man, his daughter is a good person, and my husband helped the man who's trying to kill her." Watson opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, contracts, photographs, letters, a complete paper trail of Mayor Johnson's involvement with Dalton. "Why didn't you come forward before?" Watson asked. "Because I was afraid, because I thought if I stayed quiet I'd be safe." Tears ran down Patricia's face. "But there's no safety in silence, there's only shame." Watson pulled out his phone and called Dalton. "Sheriff, you need to get to Mayor Johnson's house right now. Mrs. Johnson is making accusations against her husband, says he's embezzling town funds. She's threatening to go to the news." On the other end of the line, Dalton swore viciously. "Keep her there, I'm coming." Watson hung up and looked at Patricia. "You need to leave town, right now, don't tell me where you're going, pack a bag and drive. The FBI will contact you when it's safe to come back." Patricia nodded, already moving toward the stairs. "Tell Sarah Chen I'm sorry we didn't protect her father, and tell her to give those bastards hell." Watson left the mayor's house and drove toward the warehouse. As he passed Main Street, he saw Dalton's SUV roaring in the opposite direction, headed for Johnson's house. The distraction had worked. The warehouse would be less defended now. Watson grabbed his radio. "Jake, if you're listening, you've got 15 minutes before Dalton realizes this is a setup. Make them count." Jake had already analyzed everything he needed. Now it was time to move. He circled to the back entrance of the warehouse, the one Barnes and Tucker used for smoke breaks. Atlas and Rex flanked him, both dogs ready. He could hear voices inside. 2 men talking, laughing. Barnes and Tucker left to guard Sarah while Dalton dealt with the mayor situation. "I think the boss is really gonna kill her," Tucker's voice uncertain. "Dude, you know he is, he's done it before." Barnes, matter of fact. Remember that environmentalist who was trying to shut down the logging operation, found him at the bottom of a ravine, ruled an accident. Yeah, but she's a cop. Which makes it even more important. Can't have cops snooping around, bad for business. Jake tested the door handle. Locked, but it was a cheap lock. He pulled out his knife and slipped the blade into the gap. 30 seconds later, the lock clicked open. He eased the door open an inch. Barnes and Tucker were 20 feet away, their backs to him, standing near the office where Sarah was held. Jake released both dogs. Attack quiet. Atlas and Rex moved like shadows. Both dogs had been trained for combat situations. They knew how to take down threats without barking, without warning. Tucker went down first. Rex hit him from the side, jaws clamping on his arm. Tucker screamed and fell. Barnes spun around, reaching for his gun, but Atlas was already in the air. 100 pounds of German Shepherd hit Barnes in the chest, driving him backward into a table. Pill bottles scattered across the floor. Jake was through the door before either man could recover. He kicked Barnes' gun away, then delivered a precise strike to the side of his head. Barnes went limp. Tucker was still struggling with Rex, but Jake grabbed his collar and yanked him away from the dog. Move and I'll let him go for your throat, Jake said quietly. And Tucker froze. Jake zip-tied both men's hands behind their backs, then used their own belts to secure their ankles. He gagged them with duct tape from a roll on the work table. The entire operation took 90 seconds. Then he ran to the office. Sarah was exactly where he'd seen her from the ventilation shaft, handcuffed to a chair, her face showing the marks of Dalton's violence. Her eyes widened when she saw him. Who? Jake Cole. I was Tom's friend. He pulled out his knife and started working on the handcuffs. Your father and I served together. I came for his funeral. I saw what Dalton did to you at the gas station. You're the guy who got arrested, Sarah said, her voice hoarse. Yeah, it didn't stick. The handcuffs clicked open. Can you walk? Sarah stood up, wincing. I think he cracked my ribs, but I can move. She saw Rex and dropped to her knees, hugging the dog. Rex, oh God, Rex, I thought he killed you. Rex whined and licked her face, his whole body wiggling with joy. We need to go, Jake said. Dalton will figure out the distraction any minute. Sarah grabbed his arm. Wait, the evidence. We have it. Rex had it in his GPS tracker. Watson's taking it to the FBI right now. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. My dad's evidence. That too, Watson saved Tom's journal. Watson, Deputy Watson helped you. People are braver than they think when someone gives them a reason. Jake moved to the door, checking the warehouse. Barnes and Tucker were still secure, both conscious but not going anywhere. Then they heard the sound of tires on gravel, a vehicle pulling up fast outside. Dalton was back. The rolling door of the warehouse began to open, metal screeching against metal. Dalton's SUV pulled inside. The door closed behind him. Dalton got out of the vehicle, his face purple with rage. Barnes, Tucker, what the hell is? He saw his two men tied up on the floor. Then he saw Jake standing in front of the office with Sarah behind him and two German shepherds at his sides. For a moment, Dalton just stared. Then he smiled. It was the smile of a man who'd backed too many people into corners, who'd gotten away with too much for too long. Jake Cole, Dalton said, his voice almost cheerful. You're tougher than you look, breaking out of a holding cell, taking down two armed men, rescuing the girl. Very impressive, very heroic. He pulled his gun from his holster. Very stupid. Put the gun down, Dalton, Jake said calmly. The FBI is coming. They have all the evidence. They know about the drugs, the money laundering, the fake prescriptions. They know you killed Tom Chen. It's over. Is it? Dalton walked closer, his gun pointed at Jake's chest. Because from where I'm standing, I've got the gun and you've got nothing. I can shoot you right now, claim you were an accomplice helping this corrupt cop steal my evidence. Self-defense, case closed. There are cameras everywhere these days, Jake said. People recorded what you did this morning. It's all over the internet. You're already finished. Maybe, but I'm taking you two with me. Dalton's finger moved to the trigger. "No," Sarah shouted. She stepped out from behind Jake. "If you're going to shoot someone, shoot me. Leave him alone. He's innocent." Dalton's gun swung toward Sarah. "Oh, I'm definitely shooting you. You've been a pain in my ass for weeks, just like your father," except he went quietly. Heart attack in his sleep. Never knew what hit him. Sarah's face went white. "You killed my dad." "Potassium injection. Looks exactly like a heart attack. Your dad was getting too close, asking too many questions. I warned him to back off. He didn't listen." Dalton shrugged. "Same lesson you're about to learn." "You confessed to murder," a voice said from the shadows. Watson stepped out from behind a stack of boxes, his phone held up recording. "To multiple murders, to drug trafficking, to conspiracy, and I got every word." Dalton spun toward Watson, his gun tracking to the new threat. In that split second of distraction, Jake moved. Jake's training took over. He'd spent 12 years learning how to disarm threats, how to move faster than human reaction time, how to turn an opponent's confidence into a weapon. He closed the distance to Dalton in 3 steps. His hand snapped out, striking Dalton's wrist. The gun fired, the sound deafening in the enclosed space, but the bullet went into the ceiling. Jake's other hand came up in a palm strike to Dalton's chin, snapping his head back. Dalton was bigger, heavier, and used to winning through intimidation. But Jake was a trained warrior who'd fought in places where losing meant dying. Dalton swung a wild punch. Jake blocked it and delivered 3 quick strikes to the ribs, precision hits that took the wind out of Dalton's lungs. The sheriff stumbled back, gasping. "You think you're tough," Dalton wheezed. "I own this town." "Not anymore," Jake said quietly. Dalton charged like a bull, trying to use his size advantage. Jake sidestepped and used Dalton's momentum against him, guiding him face first into a metal support beam. The impact made a hollow, ringing sound. Dalton collapsed to his knees, blood running from his nose. Jake kicked the gun away. Atlas and Rex had their teeth bared, ready to attack if Dalton moved. Watson came forward with handcuffs. Together, he and Jake secured Dalton's hands behind his back. The sheriff was still conscious, staring up at them with hate and disbelief. "You can't do this," Dalton said. "I'm the sheriff. I'm the law in Pine Ridge." "No," Sarah said, walking over to stand above him. "You're a murderer and a drug dealer, and you're going to prison for the rest of your life." Outside, they could hear sirens, multiple vehicles approaching fast. Watson looked at Jake. "That'll be the FBI." "Right on time," Jake said. Agent Maria Reeves arrived with 6 vehicles and 12 federal agents. They flooded into the warehouse with weapons drawn, expecting a fight, but found Dalton already in handcuffs, sitting on the floor with blood on his face. She looked at Jake. "Mr. Cole, I told you to stand down." "Yes, ma'am, you did," Jake replied. "I'm not very good at following orders." Agent Reeves almost smiled, then she turned to Sarah. "Officer Chen, are you injured?" "Broken ribs, I think, bruises, but I'm okay." Sarah was leaning on Rex, the dog supporting her weight. "Agent Reeves, I have evidence, everything you need to dismantle Dalton's operation." "Watson's already delivered it to my team," Reeves said. "We've been reviewing it for the last hour. We have enough to arrest Dalton, Mayor Johnson, Judge Crawford, Dr. Stone, and about 15 others. This is the biggest corruption case in Montana in 20 years. She knelt down in front of Dalton. "Richard Dalton, you're under arrest for drug trafficking, conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, money laundering, obstruction of justice, assault on a law enforcement officer, and murder. You have the right to remain silent." "I want my lawyer," Dalton interrupted. "Good luck with that," Reeves said. "Every lawyer in 3 counties is going to be afraid to touch this case once the evidence goes public." 2 agents pulled Dalton to his feet and walked him toward a waiting vehicle. As they passed Sarah, Dalton looked at her and said, "Your father died for nothing. You're just finishing what killed him." Sarah met his eyes without flinching. "My father died a hero, you'll die a criminal, there's a difference." They took Dalton away. Through the open warehouse door, Jake could see a crowd gathering on the road. Word had spread through Pine Ridge like wildfire. People had come to see if it was really true, if Sheriff Dalton was finally being brought down. The scene where Dalton confessed to murder while being recorded by Watson served as the villain's final play. His ego and confidence had been his downfall, just as Watson predicted. Linda Marsh arrived at the warehouse with more evidence. Radio logs showing Dalton had ordered Watson to fake reports. Dispatch records proving Dalton had deleted calls about suspicious activity at his warehouse. Internal affairs complaints that had been buried for years. She handed everything to Agent Reeves with shaking hands. I should have come forward years ago. I was afraid, but Tom Chen wasn't afraid and he paid for it. His daughter wasn't afraid and she almost died. I'm done being afraid. Reeves took the evidence and put a hand on Linda's shoulder. You did the right thing today, that's what matters. Will I lose my job? We'll see that you don't. The town needs good people in positions of trust. You're one of the few Dalton didn't corrupt. That means something. Dalton's desperation had shown in the warehouse when he'd tried to shoot Jake and Sarah rather than surrender. That moment had been his breaking point, the moment his facade of control shattered completely. More FBI vehicles arrived throughout the afternoon. By 4 o'clock, agents were executing search warrants across Pine Ridge, Dalton's house, the mayor's office, Judge Crawford's chambers, the medical examiner's office, and 6 businesses that had served as fronts for the money laundering operation. They found everything. Ledgers listing every drug transaction for 8 years. Bank statements showing millions of dollars in illegal profits. Recorded phone calls between conspirators. And in Dalton's home office, a safe containing evidence from every person he'd ever blackmailed or threatened, his insurance policy that had just become his death warrant. The town watched in stunned silence as official after official was arrested. Mayor Brad Johnson led out of town hall in handcuffs. Judge Ellen Crawford removed from the courthouse by federal marshals. Dr. Richard Stone arrested at his Billings office. County Medical Examiner Frank Crawford taken into custody at the hospital. By evening, 16 people were under federal arrest. The entire corrupt infrastructure of Pine Ridge had collapsed in a single day. At 6 o'clock, Agent Reeves held a press conference in front of the Pine Ridge Town Hall. News crews had driven up from Billings, Missoula, and even Bozeman. This was the biggest story to hit Montana in years. Today, the FBI arrested 16 individuals on charges related to an extensive drug trafficking and corruption ring operating out of Pine Ridge, Montana, Reeves announced. The ring was led by Sheriff Richard Dalton, who used his position of authority to run a prescription opioid distribution network that spanned 3 states and generated millions of dollars in illegal profits. She detailed the charges: conspiracy, drug trafficking, money laundering, obstruction of justice, bribery, assault, and murder. This investigation was made possible by the courage of several individuals who refused to be silenced by fear, Reeves continued. Officer Sarah Chen discovered evidence of corruption and contacted our office despite threats to her life. Deputy Michael Watson provided crucial testimony and evidence. Civilian Linda Marsh came forward with years of documented crimes. And Jake Cole, a Navy SEAL veteran, intervened to protect Officer Chen when corrupt authorities attempted to silence her. The cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, but Reeves held up her hand. The message today is simple: corruption does not win. Justice may take time, but it prevails when good people refuse to be silent. Pine Ridge will recover from this. The people who enabled this corruption will face the consequences. And the citizens of this town can begin to rebuild trust in their institutions. Sarah stood on the steps behind Reeves, her ribs wrapped, her face bruised but determined. Rex sat at her side and Jake stood next to them with Atlas. They didn't seek the attention, but they accepted it because their presence sent a message. Stand up, speak out, fight back. The crowd that had gathered in front of Town Hall began to applaud. It started with one person, then spread through the group. People were crying, hugging, relieved. George from the gas station was there. "Thank you," he said to Sarah. "Your father would be proud." The two loggers who'd witnessed the assault had come back to town. They approached Watson. "We're sorry we didn't speak up this morning. We were afraid." "You're here now," Watson said. "That's what counts." Bate, the young mother who'd recorded the video, brought her children to meet Sarah. "You're a hero," she told her. "I want my kids to know that good people exist, that fighting for what's right matters." Mary Henderson from the animal shelter brought Rex a new collar with his name engraved on a brass plate. "Every hero needs proper recognition," she said, fastening it around the dog's neck. Patricia Johnson, the mayor's wife, watched from the edge of the crowd. She'd given evidence that would help convict her husband, and she was filing for divorce. She caught Sarah's eye and nodded once, an acknowledgement between two women who'd found the courage to do the right thing despite the cost. As the sun set over Pine Ridge, Jake and Sarah sat on the steps of the town hall, both too tired to move. Atlas and Rex lay at their feet, the two dogs exhausted but content. "I can't believe you broke out of jail to rescue me," Sarah said. "You didn't even know me." "I knew your father," Jake replied. "Tom was one of the best men I ever served with. He talked about you constantly, his daughter who was going to make the world better. He was right." Sarah wiped her eyes. "Dalton said he killed my dad, potassium injection to fake a heart attack. I heard the FBI will investigate. If they can prove it, he'll face murder charges." "Good." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "My dad left me his evidence, you know. He hid it in the attic in a box labeled Sarah's baby clothes. He knew I'd find it eventually. He knew I'd finish what he started." "He knew you were brave." "I wasn't brave, I was terrified." Jake looked at her. "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right even when you're afraid. You did that. Your father would be incredibly proud." Sarah leaned her head against Jake's shoulder and cried for her father, for her town, for the fear and pain and injustice she'd carried for weeks. Jake sat with her, silent, understanding that sometimes people just needed to grieve. When she finally stopped crying, Sarah said, "What happens now?" "You heal, the town heals. The FBI builds their case, and in about a year, Dalton and his people will go to trial. You'll testify. It'll be hard, but you'll get through it." "What about you?" Jake looked out at the mountains turning purple in the fading light. "I was just passing through. I'll head back to California tomorrow." "Don't," Sarah said quietly. "Please don't. This town needs good people, people who aren't afraid, people who know how to stand up to bullies." She looked up at him. "I need a friend, someone who knew my dad, someone I can trust." Jake thought about his empty apartment in San Diego, about running with Atlas through the same trails every morning, about having nothing to do and nowhere to be. Then he thought about Tom Chen, his best friend who died trying to protect this town. About the promise he'd made to check on Tom's daughter. "I'll think about it," he said. Sarah smiled. It was the first real smile he'd seen on her face all day. "That's not a no." "No," Jake agreed, "it's not." 3 months later, summer came to Pine Ridge, turning the mountains green and filling the valley with wildflowers. The snow melted, the river ran fast and clear, and the town began to heal. Sheriff Rick Dalton sat in federal prison in Colorado, awaiting trial. The prosecutors had added murder charges after exhuming Tom Chen's body and finding evidence of potassium injection. Dalton was looking at life in prison without parole. His empire was gone, his money seized, his name a symbol of corruption. Mayor Brad Johnson had taken a plea deal, 20 years in exchange for testimony against Dalton and Judge Crawford. His wife, Patricia, had divorced him and moved to Billings, where she volunteered at a women's shelter helping others find the courage she'd found. Judge Ellen Crawford and her husband Frank both faced trial in September. Dr. Richard Stone had already been convicted and sentenced to 15 years. The dealers who'd worked with Dalton had been arrested in 6 different states. Deputy Frank Hayes and Deputy Mike Stone had been charged with assault and obstruction. Both were in custody awaiting trial. The town of Pine Ridge had elected a new interim sheriff, Michael Watson, who'd been promoted from deputy after his courage in exposing Dalton's crimes. Watson wore the badge with humility and determination, working to rebuild trust between the department and the community. Linda Marsh had been appointed to a newly created position, Director of Transparency and Accountability. She worked to ensure that records were kept properly, that complaints were investigated fairly, and that no one person could ever accumulate the kind of unchecked power Dalton had wielded. Mary Henderson's animal shelter received a grant from the state to expand its programs. Rex had become something of a celebrity, featured in articles about police dogs who'd helped solve major crimes. Children visited the shelter to meet him, and Mary used his story to teach them about courage and loyalty. George Miller's gas station had become a tourist stop. People drove hours to see where the hero SEAL had confronted the corrupt sheriff. George kept the video footage on a TV in his store, not for profit, but as a reminder of what happened when good people refused to stay silent. Bate, the young mother who'd recorded the original assault, had been honored by the governor for her bravery. She'd given speeches at schools across Montana about standing up for what's right, even when it's scary. And Sarah Chen had healed, physically from her broken ribs, and emotionally from the trauma of losing her father and nearly losing her life. She'd been promoted to acting lieutenant, leading the Pine Ridge Police Department through its transformation from corrupt to trustworthy. She wore her father's watch every day, a reminder of the legacy he'd left her. On her desk was the journal Watson had saved, open to the last page Tom had written. "If you're reading this, Sarah, something has happened to me. I don't regret trying to stop Dalton. I only regret that I couldn't finish the job, but I know you will. You're braver than me, smarter than me, and more stubborn than your mother ever was. Don't let fear stop you, don't let corruption win, and remember you're never alone. The people who love you are always watching over you, even from far away. I love you, sweetheart, make me proud." Sarah had made him proud every single day. Jake Cole had decided to stay in Pine Ridge. He'd rented a small house on the edge of town with a view of the mountains and enough land for Atlas to run. He'd started a security consulting business, helping small towns develop transparency and accountability programs to prevent the kind of corruption that had infected Pine Ridge. But mostly, he spent time with Sarah. They ran together in the mornings, their dogs racing ahead of them. They had dinner at the town diner where people stopped by their table to say thank you. They drove up to the mountains on weekends, finding peace in the forests that Tom Chen had loved. They didn't talk about what they were to each other, friend, partner, family. Labels didn't matter. What mattered was trust, respect, and the knowledge that they'd both fight for what was right, no matter the cost. On the 3-month anniversary of Dalton's arrest, Sarah and Jake drove to the cemetery where Tom Chen was buried. Sarah placed flowers on her father's grave, blue irises, his favorite. "Hi, Dad," she said quietly. "I just wanted to update you. Dalton's in prison, the town is healing, people aren't afraid anymore, and I met Jake, your friend from the Marines. He told me stories about you I'd never heard, about how brave you were, how much you cared about doing the right thing." She paused, wiping her eyes. "I miss you every day, but I know you're proud, I know you're watching over me, and I promise I'll keep fighting for justice just like you taught me." Jake stood back, giving her privacy. Atlas and Rex sat together in the grass, two working dogs who'd helped save lives and bring criminals to justice. The sun was warm, the sky was blue, and the mountains stood eternal and strong. After a few minutes, Sarah turned to Jake. "Thank you for everything, for saving my life, for staying, for being the kind of person my dad knew I could trust." "Your father would have done the same for me," Jake said. "That's what brothers do, and that's what friends do." They walked back to Jake's truck together, the two dogs following. As they drove away from the cemetery, Sarah looked out at Pine Ridge spreading below them, the town that had been saved by courage, truth, and people who refused to give up. "You know what my dad used to say?" Sarah asked. "What's that?" "One person can't change the world, but one person can change their corner of it. And if enough people change their corners, eventually the whole world changes." Jake smiled. Tom was a smart man. "Yeah," Sarah agreed, he was. They drove home through the summer evening, through a town that was learning to trust again, through mountains that had witnessed corruption fall and justice rise. And somewhere Tom Chen was watching, proud of his daughter, grateful for his friend, and at peace knowing that the truth had finally won. If this story of courage and justice touched your heart, please subscribe for more true stories of veterans protecting their communities and everyday heroes who refuse to stay silent when they witness corruption. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that good triumphs over evil, that one person can make a difference, and that standing up for what's right always matters. And comment below which moment inspired you most. We pray that God blesses every person watching this. We pray for strength for those fighting their own battles against corruption and injustice. We pray for courage for those facing powerful enemies who seem untouchable. We pray for protection for the vulnerable in our communities, for the officers who serve with honor, for the civilians who find the bravery to speak truth to power. And we pray that the spirit of heroes like Jake Cole and Sarah Chen lives in all of us, reminding us that silence in the face of evil is the same as complicity, and that our voices, our actions, and our courage can change everything. If you believe that courage matters, if you believe that one person standing up can change everything, if you believe that God watches over those who fight for justice, write Amen in the comments below. Thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for believing in justice. Thank you for refusing to be silent when you witness corruption. Stay strong, stay faithful, and remember, you are never alone in the fight for what's right. God bless you all.